Welcome to episode number 103 of Killer POV. We are reporting from my living room. For now.
We've been downside.
I'm Rob G. from Icons of Fright, FearNet. I'm with Elric Kane, Inside Horror.
Some stuff.
This Week in Horror.
Yeah. A long list.
Along with
The Jump Cut.
The Jump Cut Cafe, curator of the Jump Cut. And Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. And the reason we're doing this, we will have guests later on in the show. But Bekah is off to the Phoenix Comic-Con.
Phoenix Comic-Con.
In fact, she'll be there when this airs. So if you happen to be in Phoenix, go and say hello. And she'll be at the Fango booth if you could find it. I hear it's huge.
Yeah, they're supposed to have like 150,000 people this year. That is insane. I mean, honestly, we went to Phoenix last year and it rivaled San Diego Comic-Con for me.
Wow. And
the amount of traffic that we saw at the booth. So this has become like one of the biggest cons we do of the year. And I love downtown Phoenix. So, and I've got a couple of panels. So I'll be doing like a Fango panel and a State of Horror panel. And then I'm doing Dead Right Horror trivia there. So all types of fun stuff.
I only wanted to go for the Alice Cooper fried chicken.
Cooperstown in Phoenix.
Which is not downtown. I'm kind of bummed because like I would have to like drive to it, right?
Yeah, but Phoenix is not that big.
Okay.
Pretty sure you can get to it.
I may have to go visit some Alice Cooper chicken just for the story of the waitresses walking around in makeup that you told.
Yes, everyone wears the Alice Cooper makeup. It's kind of amazing.
That's awesome. So yeah, come see me in Phoenix.
Yeah, so I saw some things. Did you guys see some things?
I saw some things.
I saw some things.
Some things.
Mostly not much, but I saw, I saw a little bit.
All right, why don't you kick us off? What did you see?
Okay, well, we did that short film night at Jump Cut.
Great, yeah, a lot of fun.
A lot of interesting different work besides trying to make films play. The problem when you do one of these ones where the films aren't all put onto one disc is you run the problem of your player not liking some discs.
Right, which happened.
And we had a good run where it played all of them, and then in the last one, Andrew Cash's, it just did not recognize disc anymore, and so that was a little bit tricky, and we ended up needing a backup player. But there was you introed Steve Daniels' movie,
yes, Dirty Silverware,
which was a hit.
I heard that one was really good.
Yeah, I was so happy. Steve's a filmmaker from South Carolina. He's a listener of the show too, but he's an old friend of mine for the last decade, and I discovered him on Fangoria Blood Drive Volume 2. He was on there. I think Stuart Gordon praised his short. So naturally you hear that and you're like, oh, well, who's this kid? And he's just such a sweet guy, and all his shorts have this tremendous amount of heart, and they've got like that kind of phonetic Raimi style to them, and a little bit of that Del Toro kind of fantasy, but they're all just him. And Dirty Silverware is the one that I think captures him the best. It's on YouTube. I'll post a link to it.
I also really liked his ABC. I actually think I liked it more than any of the other ABCs of Death. He didn't make it in, but T is for Tick, I believe.
T is for Termite.
Termite.
He also did M is for Marauder for the second one.
Okay.
And unfortunately, on both he didn't get in.
Yeah.
But his shorts placed really, really high, and I think both of his ABC shorts are on YouTube as well. But great filmmaker, and it was really... Everyone was really nice about. I mean, all the films were good. John Gulager showed a great film. Andrew Cash and John Scott.
I really liked, elements of Hag by Eric Gardner were really strong. There's certain sequences
I love his
creepy.
Earlier one, Blue Hole.
Yeah, Blue Hole's good.
Really
this
good.
is similar. It's like there's a couple notes where I'm like, oh, could have used a little tightening, and I don't know where they are, and that. But the actual scare parts are really interesting. The sleep paralysis stuff, which touched a little close to home for Rob over there.
Yeah, this week I've mentioned it on the show previously, but I used to suffer from sleep paralysis years ago. I haven't had an incident in a really long time, and then like 2 or 3 nights ago, it hit me like 3 times in a row. And
oh my gosh.
It was the most awful thing ever. And it was weird because it's like you're not supposed to suffer from it if you sleep on your side, which is what I do. I sleep from side to side. But on both, I remember it distinctly. On the first occasion, I'm on my side, and I think I'm awake, but I can't tell. And I hear a growling behind me, and it feels like a hand is going up and down my back.
God.
Oh, my Lord.
And I couldn't move, and I'm like, oh, no. And then finally I sprung...
Was it Turek?
It was
Turek.
So finally I sprung out of it, and then I tried to go back to sleep again. And this time it felt like... it's pitch black, so you can't tell what's going on. It felt like somebody got a running start and jumped on top of me. Like out of nowhere, you just feel the pressure. And of course, I tried to get up and I couldn't. And
Do you like stop breathing?
No, I mean, you're fully aware of it. You're like groggy. You just can't move. Like your body just won't move. And you're sort of trying to snap out of it. And usually, I'm sure it only is 10, 15 seconds long, but it feels like an eternity.
What's the worst you've ever had, like back when you were younger? Do you remember the worst experience?
God, no, I can't. I mean, I guess when I used to sleep on my stomach, because then it would hit me while I was face down, and I'd always dream that I was either drowning or choking, because I'd be face down on my pillow, and I was actually incapable of breathing.
Did you ever see anything like, I know that movie Nightmare that's coming out soon by Rodney Asher, and people have said it's one of the most frightening films, let alone documentaries
and it's
about
weird.
that.
I've seen images from it, and I've never seen anything. I mean, I've seen the old tag. That I've definitely seen.
Huh.
Wow. See, I had it happen once, and it was so vivid for me. I was in high school, and it wasn't like I never even associated it with sleep paralysis because I didn't see a hag. No one was crushing my chest, but I fell asleep on my couch in my parents' basement. And I thought it was just a dream where I thought that someone had come into the room and I had been drugged and they were trying to take me, but I couldn't move and I couldn't scream or anything. And it seemed like it went on for an eternity. And then I woke up and I was fine. And I thought it was just a dream. And it wasn't until I started reading about it that I was like, wow, that was actually like a condition thing that people have. But I've only had it that once, but it was terrifying. And I will never forget that moment.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised. I posted about it. I'm surprised how many people are aware and have had it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it as a condition. I know there's so many things in our sleep, but I've had like those slightly middle ground waking nightmares when I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
Being pulled into like a wall and you can't get out.
Yeah.
You're like something has pulled you in and you're like looking back into the world that you're no longer in and just weird stuff like that. But the breathing thing just is kind of terrifying.
Yeah, the breathing one is what trips me out. Like you feel like you're being crushed.
Yeah. The irony being, and not that there's any link between horror and this condition, but I can understand if I sat and had a 7-hour marathon of like horror stuff and then I saw some creepy shit while I went to sleep.
Yeah. Right.
Like that whole day was like all 80s. Like I watched Just One of the Guys, 3 O'Clock High. Like I didn't watch a single horrific image all day.
That's called withdrawal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
You need to watch some more horror stuff, Rob. Your psyche's not adjusting
Horror's
well.
good for you. Horror's the purge. I watched Electric Boogaloo, the Canon documentary, after it was sent to us. I really liked it, I got to say.
Yeah.
I thought it was really fun. I thought it was, fairly educational. The thing about Mark Hartley's last two, they're both missing like the extra gear that was in Ozploitation. Ozploitation was so wild the way it's put together. And I think part of it, and probably in his defense, probably budgetary, that he probably hasn't had the budgets, but there's a lot more, say, animation and crazy backgrounds. He would shoot, say, Tarantino is in a movie theater and somebody else is somewhere. I felt, I wasn't a big fan of the one about the Thai film.
Oh, the Switch, Machete Maidens.
Yeah, Machete.
Yeah,
that was the Philippines?
Yeah, like good stories.
Okay.
I like the world of the film, but it's all black backdrop interviews, and it feels a little dead
it's
when
slow.
you're dealing with when you're dealing with films that move like the way they do. I felt similar in this, but it didn't ruin the film by any means. This is a great story, and I didn't have an issue with what I thought might have been an issue, which is Golan Globus voices not being represented.
Oh, they're in there.
They're still in there,
and quite a bit.
That was totally fine, and it's fun to learn some of the things I didn't know. I didn't really know just how much of how much Toby Hooper, who's going to be a topic in my next film too, but how much how favored he was there. How they were just going to throw anything at Toby, and how he kind of really screwed it up for them a couple times. Invader from Mars.
That Invaders from Mars Blu-ray came out not too long ago from Scream Factory, and if you between the commentary and like the documentary on there, I just like. Even the timetable, he had like almost like a year to make that.
That's
movie.
wild.
Like several months and like millions of dollars, and like you see the work that went into it, and you're like, man, they really threw some money at him.
But then the high point is also like Life Force could never exist without this studio at that time, because it's so. As a kid, you don't think about these things. You're watching Life Force, go, holy cow, how did this exist?
Yeah,
and then you watch it, go, oh, it could only exist with people throwing money at somebody who's doing something just totally bad shit. It's a fascinating film. Stuff about He-Man and Van Damme and Stallone, over the top stuff I never knew. When I was a kid, I just thought Over the Top was like this great movie.
Yeah,
I didn't question how it came to be and how much money
it's a great movie
Stallone made off it, but that's insane. I would highly recommend it for any fan of the 80s. It's kind of essential viewing for that kind of thing. I would say, like I said, there's just this like gear. I think it's almost like it needs to be a little less in control. I think the last two films have been very controlled, whereas Ozploitation felt like you didn't know where it was going. It's a little off the rails, and I'd like to see a little more of that. And then lastly, and most importantly, because I think I'm the only one who did it, very quickly, tried watching Zombievers. got through
Oh
5
my gosh.
because I saw the poster.
It's streaming on Netflix
It's streaming
now,
on Netflix.
right?
I watched 5 minutes and goes, oh, okay, clearly this is not for me, but I fast forwarded till I saw an actual beaver, and that beaver was awesome. I gotta say, the beaver looked cool, but I was like, no, too close to when I watch Wolf Cop. I can't do this right now.
But you know, I've seen some of the reviews on Netflix, and some people are absolutely loving it.
Some people love it. That's what's cool.
It keeps popping
yeah.
up as like recommended for you.
No, I want
And so-
people who love it to find it, but it just won't be me. But no, the big one I watched was Poltergeist, the remake. It's an interesting remake in the fact that it's cast like almost perfectly. Like the casting is great. The family is really interesting. I think the family moments feel a little fresh, and you really connect. Sam Rockwell, steals the show. And it has absolutely no idea how to make a horror film. Like none. Like it's bereft of tension completely. For instance, like, back in Poltergeist, a reverse shot of a clown. That was the biggest thing I took away from it. Like the shot of a kid's face and then a clown. Shot of the kid's face, clown. Shot, getting closer, closer. Scary, scary. Tension builds. Okay, instead in this, it's more like a fluid steady cam shot that will be on the kid. Then it'll flow gently behind the kid to see something in the distance. And then back around with an unbroken take. There's no tension in it. You never feel any suspense building in this movie at all, to be honest. There's a couple gags that could have been really fun. They go deeply into the further kind of thing. Oh, they're trying some new thing. The CG takes you out of a lot of the people. It's just, and it also tries to rehash a couple of the gags, but not very well. Almost like a quick joke that brings them up and then it brushes over them. So it was a really frustrating film in that sense. I think it's mildly entertaining because the family stuff was so kind of, fun. But, it has a scene early on in the film where they're at a dinner at some rich people's house. They don't tell you why they're there. They just moved to this town. It's one of the most baffling scenes I'm not even kidding when I say it's one of the worst in my whole life of watching a movie. Like, what? And the scene's there, and the only thing that it's there for is so one of the rich people can go, at least it wasn't built on an Indian burial ground. And you're just going, holy shit.
Wow.
Like, it's really one of those scenes. I'd love to ask one of the editors one day why that scene's in there. I assume it had to be.
If that's the joke, that they obviously didn't stick with the original
It's
plot.
still built on cemetery. It's just not an Indian burial. It's almost like, well, at least it wasn't as bad as that. Boom, boom, But it's like this whole scene is just there. So, it has lots of issues. I think some people, it's better than some remakes in terms of just fun. But the one thing I walked away with, besides thinking like, hey, I wish we had seen even a mediocre Ty West version of this would have been more interesting.
Yeah.
But the one thing, it actually made me value Tobe Hooper. Not that we'll ever know his contribution to the first more than I ever have, because I've always been kind of like, I've read the bios on Spielberg going, Spielberg really directed a lot of that film. But what this movie is it's a Spielberg acolyte light. So the Spielberg light directing this movie without a Tobe Hooper. And what Tobe Hooper brings is the kind of chains are off. It's dangerous. There's something really ugly, like the thing with the face melting. No scenes like that in this movie. And by taking that out, what I think is his kind of danger of Tobe Hooper, it hasn't got a quality to sink your teeth into. And I'll end with this. The only thing it made me excited about was Insidious 3. Wow. Like the credits came up and I was like, fuck, man, I can't wait to see Insidious 3 in a week. Like I really felt excited to see someone who was actually going to push new ideas.
Right.
So, I would, you don't need to see it. But
I'm going to hold off till, because it's in 3D, right? Or there is a 3D
I didn't see it in
version.
3D. I saw a couple gags that might have worked in 3D.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I think as a film, for filmmakers, it's actually a pretty interesting movie to see kind of like, these techniques don't actually work to produce tension, which is weird. I don't usually watch a movie thinking like that.
Yeah.
But no, it didn't work for me. But, Rockwell was great.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that was great.
Nice.
Was that it for you? Mm-hmm. What about you, Bekah?
Well, my daughter was sick this weekend, so I spent most of the weekend watching Punky Brewster reruns. And I know it was kind of a slow weekend. And I've been binge watching Game of Thrones, which even though it's not horror, I have to say it really kicks ass.
It has some horror in there.
Yeah, it definitely does. So, but having just I just started the season like probably last Tuesday, and I'm already on the third season. So, I've been just kind of rushing through it because I'm so addicted to it. But the horror that I watched. So probably almost a year ago, one of our fans, whose real name I don't know.
He's a bloody cunt.
He's
a bloody cunt.
The bloody cunt.
I call him BC on Twitter.
His Twitter handle is, that. And he had sent us these discs because he wanted us to see this movie called Killer Tongue.
Right.
And it was like Ice Cream Man, and I don't even remember what the other one was. It was like a triple one, and then it had Killer Tongue on it.
I think like Jack Frost 2.
Yeah, Jack Frost 2. That's it. It's the snowman one.
Yeah.
And we hadn't watched them. And so this weekend, actually it started last week, I was looking at one of the forum threads through Fango, and somebody was talking about Killer Tongue being a cool movie. And I was like, okay, maybe I do need to check this out. So
We're sorry it took so long.
yes. Oh my gosh.
But one of us has finally seen it.
Yes.
One.
So I popped it in, and I had to say, guys, it's pretty fun. It's good. It's a mix. There's some parts that I was like, wow, this is actually really good, and then other parts that I was like, wah wah. I mean, because it's a Killer Tongue. There are parts that get kind of, I'll call them trauma-esque.
Human tongue or animal tongue?
Human tongue. Well, it's alien.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's not a surprise. That happens.
Sold.
But the weird thing about this is the film was made, I think it's like 96, 97, I want to say. It is very much a creation of its time, but it is taking kind of everything from horror filmmaking of that time. Like, because it's set in kind of the New Mexico, Arizona area, right along the Mexico border. And so it's got this definite Rodriguez vibe, but it's about a bank heist. So it's got this Tarantino vibe, and all the characters kind of have this Tarantino vibe going on, where every single one has like a quirky character trait. And like the gas station is run by nuns. Like everything in it is just slightly off, and it's very fast moving, and there's a whole bunch of different people, groups of people doing all different types of stuff with the heist. So it's very Tarantino-esque and kind of Pulp Fiction-y, which makes sense for the time. But at the same time, you've got this kind of femme fatale character with poodles who gets held up in a hotel, and she's part of the bank heist, and an alien lands in her soup, and she eats the soup and gets an alien tongue. And then then the whole thing gets kind of trauma-esque. And it's a weird mix. I can see why it didn't do very well, because even watching it now, I was like, it's blending these kind of horror genres that don't necessarily fit comfortably together. And that's how the movie worked, where some scenes I was like there's this scene with this gas station that's run by nuns, which is just a really like nicely done kind of Tarantino-esque scene. And then it jumps to her getting infected with this alien, and her poodles turn into men who are naked and wearing dog chains, and it's got this weird kind of homoerotic humor to it. And it gets weird.
Weird.
So, yeah, it's kind of, but it's got some good stuff to it. So
I'm afraid
still,
my chances of seeing this movie have just plummeted.
Yeah, I know.
I might still visit it.
I'm still on the fence with it. There were some moments that I was like, wow, that's really cool what they did with that. And then others that I was just kind of like, that was like glorified trauma. The tongue's kind of cool.
Yeah. I vaguely remember it. I think Fangoria or Gorezone or one of them covered it.
I'm sure we did.
And I remember, so that's like late 90s. So that was like one of those direct-to-video things, because I remember that and a movie called Razorblade Smile with like a female vampire with like guns and sunglasses or whatever. Like I remember renting the two of them. So I feel like I've seen Killer Tongue. I just don't remember it because, back then it was like just rent.
It's a weird mix.
I love that title, Razorblade Smile.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That races the imagination.
Yeah.
But Killer Tongue is Spanish. And like even the copy that's on our DVD, all of the credits and everything are in Spanish.
Oh, cool.
And so I don't know. I'm looking right now to see if the director went on to do anything else. Yeah. I'm kind of curious. He's got a couple things listed, but nothing really noticed.
It's funny when you talk about some of those tonal things, I think of The Being, but I really like The Being. Like The Being kind of all works for the Jackie Chong?
Yeah, Jackie
Kong.
Kong is king.
Kong is king. That's right, yeah. But yeah, okay. Well, maybe if Rob visits it, maybe I'll have to.
Yeah, I think I'm going to at some point.
I will say the first 20 minutes were kind of interesting, and then after that, but I mean, it's got a lot of sophomoric humor. There's like a lot of fart jokes and peeing on people and things like that. Which kind of
wait, back it up.
Peeing on people, which gets back into like the trauma humor and a lot of like
yellow handkerchief, back left pocket. Thank you, Powers Booth. See cruising.
It's definitely kind of trauma-esque in that regard.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, for me, back on our 100th episode, there was a little movie that AJ discovered that he's been searching for. Our friend Jack, who listens, narrowed it down to being The Prey from 1984.
Yes.
Do you know much about it? Otherwise, before that, did you know?
I never even heard of it
until
our 100th.
Is it a one-shot filmmaker?
I think so. I gotta look it up again. I didn't really investigate the filmmaker, but AJ and I finally watched it. It's got the greatest tagline of all time, which is that image of an axe, and it just says, "It's not human, and it has an axe."
Yeah, that's good.
Which to me is the best tagline since Pieces. You know?
Yeah, that's really good.
But we checked it out, and it was pretty cool. It was it's an interesting movie because obviously I think it was shot or made in like 79 or so and didn't get a release until VHS in '84, and very briefly. But it's a pretty traditional, 6 or so kids go out into the woods and, he looks kind of like Jason, a killer, like kind of comes after them. And, there's like a sheriff it's like a park ranger. It's one of those, it's a weird tonal movie, because there's a whole segment where it just cuts to the park ranger, like, chilling out in his little cabin playing banjo for like a good minute.
What year was this again?
Well, it came out in 1984, but I think they made it a few years earlier.
That sounds like when they cut in, what's the Zito one? With the Prowler.
Oh, yeah.
Every time they cut to the guy, he's like on the fishing trip, and it's really bullshit.
And I kind of love that because...
I don't know. That was kind of like I don't want to call it like the trope of the time, but I've seen that in a lot of these movies like that, where like they cut. I mean, it's even in like Last House on the Left, where it's like, horrible killers, and then they cut back to like Keystone Cops moments with the cops being really bumbling.
Yeah,
or even Phantasm Reggie playing the guitar.
That's true, and I love those scenes.
That's a fun scene. Yeah.
But no, I feel like look, it's a brisk 80 minutes, and I feel like they're stretching things out as long as possible to make it to 80 minutes. Right. And then there's also amazing like animal footage. Like it just cuts to like
amazing animal.
No,
footage.
like they're in the woods, and then it cuts to like a freaking owl in the tree, and you're like, wow, did they film that, or did they like buy that? Like, license.
I can guarantee you they bought it.
Probably.
Bring in the owl.
We have a 64-minute movie. How do we get it up to 80?
Yeah.
Oh, owls.
How was the sequence with that he remembered? Did you get to that?
The end? Yeah, the ending. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's not because you don't really get to see the killer much. The most fascinating thing about it is that there's a cameo part with that park ranger. Jackie Coogan is the
wow,
who played the original Uncle Fester.
Yeah,
and this is very much towards the end of his life, and it's almost like his scenes feel like, oh, we got our big star, and he's kind of improvising a little, and they're like, oh, how can we stretch this out to 80 minutes?
Right.
So there's that, and then the irony being that I just looked it up, and the guy that plays the quote unquote monster is Karen Strykenken, who played Lurch in the Addams Family remake.
Oh, wow. So he's big, nice and tall.
Ones. So there's the Addams Family connection between the two of them. And also, it opens randomly with like a fire, like a forest fire, but you don't really know what it is until much later. Mm-hmm. They're talking about like how there is a bunch of gypsies out in the wood, and they all died in a fire, except maybe one of them didn't, sort of deal. And then... Matt Serafini on Twitter replied to me saying, have you seen the version with the 15-minute gypsy fire? And I'm like,
whoa.
No.
That's how you stretch out a movie, not Al's gypsy fire.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I kind of want that 105-minute version.
Isn't it weird, like there was a time, like before now, obviously, where just if you got it to 80 minutes, you had a movie that would be sold, put in there. It didn't matter how you filled that 80 minutes, whether it's SOV or what.
Because I've definitely seen some films where I see them the first time, and this is just because I get to see the inner workings of some of the distributors. I'll see it the first time and it's like 70 minutes, and then when they get it released, there's like suddenly a 10-minute driving sequence.
But there's just most of these movies just I don't even think are coming out anymore.
Well, do you remember?
Not even dumps, really. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I haven't watched them yet, so I'll probably talk about them next week. But Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 are coming out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, I really love Sleepaway Camp 2.
2's great, and I did watch the bonus features, like the documentaries about them. And one of the greatest stories about part 2, because they made them back to back and they were intended for direct-to-video. To me, one of the scariest sequences of the whole movie is that Angela's having a nightmare, and like it cuts to her dreaming about singing like the camp song, but it's all in like slow motion and weird and stuff. So you watch a special feature, and the editor very candidly says, the movie came to 78 minutes.
Wow.
I freaked out, and I called the director, and I was like, we can't get a release unless we hit 80. And he's like, well, crap, what are we going to do? We shot everything. We shot the movie. He's like, I'm getting ready to shoot 3. And the editor said, you know what? Just get a couple of shots of Angela tossing and turning in bed, and I'll figure something out. And sure enough, that's why, and it's funny, that's why all that stuff's in slow motion, is they just needed to fill 2 minutes in.
Wow.
So there's a shot of Angela tossing and turning in bed, and then there's her singing. But the thing is, it's the creepy, scariest moment of the movie now, because they slowed down her voice, and it's, the night, it's like weird. It always stood out to me, is like, because it's a pretty fun, campy movie, that's the one scene I remember
Yeah.
being kind of like, ooh, this is a little dark and messed up.
The whole
happy
thing's
accident.
really kind of self-aware and like a wink at the audience, except for that moment.
Except for that moment, and it's
That's
because
interesting.
they just needed 2 minutes to hit 80,
That's
which I
great.
think is amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
So
For some reason, the leech scene in that movie always really. But I guess it's because
Great.
I grew up on the river and we had like severe problems with leeches. They're not everywhere along the river, but you would just like swim through one area and you'd come out with leeches because like they inhabit little pockets. So that scene always messed me
Every
up.
time you talk about home, I imagine you go home and you like walk on water, and all these insects like carry you around, and slugs. You slide along the floor on slugs. Is that right?
That's just about
probably
right.
exactly
Yeah,
what
that's
it's
pretty
like.
much it. Exact.
Nature Mom.
Nature Mom. Yeah.
So other than that, Mike C. Over at Icons of Fright had recommended a movie on Netflix Instant that he said he watched 3 times in a row. It's called SOB, Summer of Blood, and it stars. It's written, directed, and stars. Let me see if I can say his name right. Unar Tukel, who's this Turkish guy, a Turkish comedian. It is hilarious. Within the first 3 minutes, I was
Really?
already crying, and it's he's kind of like this really typical douchey kind of hipster like asshole that becomes a vampire at some point. So it's a really fun kind of horror comedy. But like just the way that they tackle, I mean, you always think like there's nothing new to be said about vampirism or whatever, but it's actually really, really funny how they tackle some of the subjects. And just he's such a horrible human being. Like he's so terrible that it's really, really funny. Like the opening scene, it's the first 2 minutes. He's at dinner with his girlfriend and she hands him an engagement ring and he puts it on the wrong hand. He's like, oh, this is so sweet. And she's like, no, it goes on your other hand. He's like, oh. He's like, yeah, I'm asking you to marry me. He's like, oh, no. And he like pulls it out and hands it back. He's like, no, that's not, no. And you're just like, oh God, he's horrible. He's
Is
horrible.
it how is? Oh, it's a horror because he's a vampire.
He becomes
Yeah.
that's it.
Who
Yeah.
distributed this? How come we haven't heard anything about it?
I don't know. It's been, I think it came out a year or two ago. But I mean, it just hit Netflix Instant. And I guarantee you, I mean, it's a lot of fun and it's really funny. And I knew there's almost no credits. Like when I hit play, it started right away. And within the first 2 minutes, I was like, oh, this is kind of a neat movie. I love it. So Summer of Blood, or as it's subtitled, SOB.
You reminded me of a Turkish thing to say right now. Actually, the best thing I've seen in the last week, and kind of what I meant by the Canon doc being a little, just slightly underwhelming, but still really fun. Oren sent me a trailer, and I don't think it's wide yet, for something he found on Vimeo. I don't know when the film's coming out. It's a trailer for a film, which you're going to love this. It's all about the Turkish rip-off movies. Ooh. And it's all these and it starts with this one guy, and he's just going, yeah, I have not been in too many, only maybe 1,000 films I made. And then the next guy goes, yeah, I made 1,364 films. And then suddenly it goes, and basically the whole gist is they're like, yeah, well, in Istanbul at that time, there's no copyright. So he's holding up all these vinyls of like Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, and goes, so we just take these soundtracks. They're already finished, and we use them. And he holds them all up like Close Encounters. He goes, yeah, we just use whole thing. No problem. And then it just shows you these clips of these, because they did a Turkish Star Wars, they did Turkish everything you can imagine, and it looked like so much fun that I literally.
Yeah.
So I'll get that link and post it on our page.
I
That
actually
is-
own the
But I'm dying
Turkish
to see it.
Exorcist.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, we've seen Lady Terminator, which is one of them,
amazing.
Which is,
an
we did a
amazing
huge
movie.
Fango
It's a
article
fun
on. It's
film.
actually a good film.
No, there's some of them probably are good, but just watching these guys in the action scenes are insane.
Yeah.
And they just had no money. They had no money.
Yeah.
Actually, in the Star Wars one, they literally just use all of Star Wars and then insert a couple shots of themselves doing things. And I'm watching the trailer going, oh my God, this is so great. So, yes, I don't know what the name of it is, but we will post it.
We got to
'cause
find
That
it.
sounds
yeah.
looks
awesome.
amazing. So.
Cool. And last movie I saw is another one that Scream Factory is putting out called Gun Woman. It's a more recent film. Filmmaker's name is Karanko Mitsutaki.
You have passed.
Yes, and it stars Azami, who was in Machine Girl
Yeah,
and some other
I remember
things. And it's a weird movie because I thought maybe it was an Asian movie that they licensed or whatever, but it's not. It definitely feels American made because there's kind of like this in between story. It's almost like there's two characters kind of telling the story of Gunwoman, and they're American, and that seems like it was all shot here in Los Angeles or whatever. And it's weird because it's got initially it's got a lo-fi feel to it until they get to all the Japanese characters, and then kind of tell the story. And the thing is, it is so it's so ludicrous, the premise, and ridiculous, and it's like one of those things that has the most, like, it's as shocking as it can get. Like, the main character that you meet early on is like this, I can't remember if he was like the son of some famous politician or a criminal or whatever, but he's the bad guy, and he just like rapes and murders and is into necrophilia and all sorts of crazy stuff. And the basic premise is he murders this doctor's wife. He murders, then rapes this doctor's wife in front of him. So he buys a girl, a junkie girl, and is getting her to kick the habit and training her to be an assassin. And it's, that part of it's kind of silly, but his plan is ridiculous, which essentially is because he's into necrophilia, this bad guy, there's apparently like this secret society, like out in the desert, where there's a little facility you go to and they let you.
Yeah, that part's true.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Just guessing.
And they let you do whatever you want with the recently deceased. So his plan is to make this girl into the perfect assassin, and then make her seem dead, to sneak her in there as a body that he would want to, do his thing to, and then hide underneath, because he's a doctor surgeon, and then hide in her body all the parts of a gun that you would need to complete this assassination.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing.
Who's
again,
he trying to assassinate in there?
Yeah.
The guy that killed his wife.
Oh,
Okay, so even though this is a Los Angeles made movie, we think this sounds like one of the Sushi Typhoon movies. Like, it sounds so Japanese.
It's insane. And that's the thing. It's like, for the first half, I'm kind of like, oh, okay. Because, then there's all the typical, like, training montage and this and that, and, like, the tough love. And, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm buying this. But then the thing is, like, it's kind of like if you have the craft of like Tarantino can set up a ridiculous premise,
right,
but the way it plays out, you're like, I can't believe that just happened. But the third act, and here's the thing, the cover that Scream Factory releases is just like a girl holding the two guns or whatever. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't realize, but the actual original cover is on the other side, so I flipped it, and it's the poster, and it's her naked and bloody.
Wow.
With a gun, and like, that's the whole third act. So like, when you get to the third act, you're like, wait, are they actually going to do everything they just said that they were going to do? It's pretty awesome. Wow. So it kind of won me over by the fact that like they actually try to pull off this ridiculous premise. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I really like that one a lot. And I mean, I love just weird, fucked up Asian cinema in general. So
nice.
Cute Japanese girls, of course.
I have to talk about... wait, was that all that you saw? I have to talk about one more that I just got a hold of that I'm kind of psyched about. I'm going to be watching it this week while I'm in Phoenix, but you guys should check it out if you get a chance so we can talk about it next week. I got a copy of this thing called Cannibal Girls, which apparently everyone else in the world has seen, but not me. It's a low-budget Canadian film from the 70s, but it stars Eugene Levy, the guy from the American Pie film, and it's directed and written by Ivan Reitman. And it's a low-budget cannibal film.
I've seen another Ivan Reitman Canadian horror before he moved over here that I reviewed way a long time ago. Saw it on beach. I can't remember the name of it. It's kind of very rapey one.
Yeah. So I'm kind of excited to see this one just because it's Eugene Levy in a horror film. So I'm going to be watching it this weekend. And I just have to state that since we're sitting here in Rob's living room, he has Count Chocula, Boo Berry, Frankenberry, and Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Would you expect anything else in my living room or kitchen?
But are they still good or are they stale?
They're good until, listen, man.
He's checking expirations right now.
These are good until June 21st.
I want the face mask on the back of the Boo Berry. That's pretty kick-ass, man.
Yeah.
We're going to hold them all up for a group photo.
Fair enough. Okay, and we will be back in the studio in like seconds.
Enjoy Phoenix, Bekah.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we are officially in the studio.
Phew, Becca's gone.
She's gone. Becca's gone. We've got beers. We can now start the show.
So technically, we're here with beers. If you are in Phoenix, you can hang out with Bekah. Good luck.
Or you could hang out with us.
Yeah, or you can just keep listening to this and forget about it.
So we have some special guests coming in. I'm actually glad that we were able to pull together this show at the last minute the way we were. But because Elric watches movies nonstop, he already has another movie he wants to talk about.
Well, sometimes I can watch something. Oh, we'll hold it to the next show. This was like the exuberance.
You couldn't wait.
This is like one of those movies that once it infects your soul, I think you're screaming it from the rafters. Thanks to listener John S. Berry, who we met in Austin, in Dallas, Texas, which is weird because he's from nowhere near Texas. He's from Upper California. He sent me a film that he was a big fan of. I'd never heard of it in my whole life. It's called Sonny Boy, and it's directed by Robert Martin Carroll, and he hasn't done much else of any note that I could see. But here's the interesting part. I was thinking about the real interesting thing about the script is just so, like, it's out there. It's one of the most bonkers films I've ever seen in my life, and it's by a guy called Graham Whiffler. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to find some way to get this guy on our show at some point. I want to ask him questions about this movie. Look up what else he did. He only did really one other thing of note. He wrote Dr. Giggles. So
oh my God.
It's going to be easy for us to track him probably through a previous
Manny
guest.
Coto, yeah.
Manny Coto. But I'm jumping, of course. This is one of the craziest movies ever. It's literally, if Jodorowsky directed Baby Doll, that like 1960s Kazan movie, it is
nothing you
nuts.
just said makes any sense to me at all.
Basically, let me put it in perspective. David Carradine plays a transvestite called Pearl and is dressed as a woman from start to end of this movie. Paul Ehlers, the big guy from the T-shirt you're wearing.
Yes.
He's the gardener from Pieces. He's also Bluto. He plays basically this like crime lord in the middle of kind of white trash nowhere desert in New Mexico of this town called Harmony. And Brad Dourif is one of his thugs. Opening scene, Brad Dourif steals a car, a hot rod kind of car. Just happened to have a baby in the back seat. Gives it to David Carradine, the woman. Pearl comes and goes, oh, we can raise it as our own. And then suddenly Bluto comes over and goes, no, it's mine, and holds it up in the air in the craziest shot, like with the crazy backlight and a baby one-handed being held in the air and basically turns out to cut his tongue out, which you don't see. So it's not like Grizzly the way he cuts his tongue out, and they raise him basically like a dog. And then he'll cut, like, he'll have one shot and go 3 years later, 6 years, 14 years later, and suddenly you've raised what this crazy kid. The whole town is kind of in fear of these criminals. Right. And then basically when this guy's of age, he tries to go kind of touch the rest of the population, and it does not go well. That's when it becomes very Jodorowsky, like reminded me of Holy Mountain or something.
Okay.
It is so weird. But also, the craziest thing about this movie is by the very end of the movie, all these events that happen are just like scene by scene odd. It cuts out at awkward moments. But when it gets by the very end, somehow it's touching. Like somehow you're actually, and this is just cult. It's not, not really horror, but it screams ultimate cult movie.
Sonny Boy, huh?
Sonny, Sonny Boy. There is no good version of it out there. TCM, he sent me a VHS rip of on a DVD. If you go to Turner Classic, you can see a bunch of cool clips and the trailer gives you a lot of good stuff. But there's a couple shots in the trailer that aren't in the film, so it made me, and the kind of rhythm of the movie made me feel like maybe this is a cut down version, and perhaps there's a better version. I would love, this is like going to become one of my goals now, is to see this film get onto Blu-ray somehow. I feel like we're going to have to grassroots this campaign, but there's so many good people in this film. And it's just a very, it's just one of those movies you watch and you go, wow, if that's possible, anything is possible to make a movie. It really is. It's like if I could feel something at the end of a movie that was that weird, and that just like, I mean, the fact that Carradine's like holding a pump action shotgun dressed as a woman completely never breaks character, and apparently on set never broke character, except he made everyone laugh the whole movie. But it's weird, you see one of these movies and then the director hasn't gone, you don't really recognize them from anything else. So so this is called Sonny Boy. If you can probably track down a VHS of it, but John did say that his friend got the VHS copy signed by Dourif at the Texas thing, and he said the head was shaking the whole time. He was just like,
Wow.
But trust me, this is not one of those movies that's just like bonkers for bonkers sake. It might be, actually. Right. But there's just something there that I'll post you the trailer.
Yeah, no, it
also has a
amazing.
great song that I posted today on my Facebook by David Carradine, and it's just a great song. It kind of goes through. It's like twangy banjo and him singing. So I want to thank you, John, and I got to say to our fans, you guys have been doing good by us. You've sent us some really cool films that we haven't talked about on the show, and that's, for us, we cast a pretty wide net, so that's cool.
I have a stack sitting at home that I haven't even touched yet from different fans that have sent stuff in. So.
Yeah, it takes us a while sometimes.
We'll get to it. We will get to it.
But good stuff. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and for me, I wanted to add that I when we were in Texas, I picked up, before the Phantasm screening, we stopped at a local bookstore, and I picked up the Gunnar Hansen book, Chainsaw Confidential, which I
spotted it.
What you spotted it for me, thank you.
A good deal.
And it was on sale. It was brand new. I've been waiting to read it, and I was like, oh, this will be perfect for the plane ride home. And, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my favorite movies, not just horror, just favorite movies.
Just one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen every documentary, I've read every article, I feel like I know everything there is to know about this movie. And, which is probably my reluctance to initially pick up the book as opposed to buying it as soon as it came out. But I'm glad I did because, getting it from Gunnar's perspective, you really get to learn. I mean, there was a dozen things that I had never known or even thought about in terms of the movie. And I actually wrote a piece on Icons of Fright. I only picked out 5 things, but I was like, here's 5 things I learned from Chainsaw Confidential, because there's just so much material in there. And again, it's the sort of stuff that he's flat out telling you this is what it is. But deep in my mind, I choose not to believe some of it still, because that's the power of cinema. You see a movie, it's your experience of it. And he
must have had a very specific viewpoint on that film, because he wasn't probably as involved as other crew members. He was probably a little more isolated.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it must have been, yeah.
He also wore the same clothes every day.
So he stank.
And yeah, he said he was the worst smelling person, and everybody tried to stay away from him and all that. But it's interesting because it's not just a straightforward bio. It's not like he's like, this is what I saw. He actually does interview a lot of the cast and crew, and then Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer. And very early on, he's like, you have a memory of something, but then also, as time goes by, your memory is actually the memory of the memory. Like it gets, the further away from time, you start to deviate the details because you're remembering it from the last time you remembered it.
And maybe remembering it from watching the movie.
Exactly.
And so it gets,
So that's why he thought it was important to, for certain key events, to talk to other people to get their perspective. So he kind of gives you a 3-point perspective on certain things. Fun tidbits were things like, in the script, it says that Leatherface had fangs, and he was supposed to have a whole, set of pointy fangs in his mouth. And he ended up going to his own dentist, who already had an imprint of his mouth. And they opted to go with just like these weird crooked baby teeth, which of course now in retrospect he says is way more terrifying. But he was disappointed at first because he thought he was going to have like this razor blade
vampire Leatherface. Now somebody could run with that movie.
So bizarre if he had done that. Things like that, and who the characters were. Like he says the name is actually their name is actually Slaughter, which he's like they don't call them the Sawyers until part 2. It's like, that's the weird misconception. There's a sign that says Slaughter Barbecue, and that's because that's their last name, which explains why the 4th one, which was directed by Kim Hinkle, they're called Slaughter, which I always thought was stupid. I was like, why are they called? No, they're the Sawyers. So it's like little tidbits like that, which I choose to say, oh, that's interesting, but I'm still not going to.
He didn't appear in any of the others, though, right?
No, he did a cameo in Texas Chainsaw 3D. But he never got to do.
Just because you made me think of the in the Canon doc that I talked about earlier, how the Canon producers really wanted the scary sequel.
And they did
not. Toby obviously wanted to do the
and
comedy.
Actually, that's another big thing I didn't write about that in my article. Was reading a lot about the things that Toby wanted to do in Texas Chainsaw 1 that he was incapable of doing because of budget, time, etc. And literally all of them are in the sequel in part 2. Like there's a whole sequence.
You can tell he was saved by having such a low budget.
Like he wanted to show a guy getting like filleted and his face being pulled off and put on by Leatherface. And like, these are all things that are Tom Savini showcases in part 2. So it's it's fascinating. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. I just found out that Gunnar actually did the audiobook version too. So he reads the audio version of it.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. And actually I'm on the very last chapter now. So he goes into, not just the making of it, but the release of it. I mean, the amount of money they got paid to make that movie it's just unbelievable and kind of a crime.
For part 2?
No, for the original.
Oh.
Yeah, Gunnar didn't do any of the sequels. I'm curious if he talks about the sequels in the last chapter or not. I haven't gotten anything like that. But he talks about the money from the original film and kind of how they were all ripped off. And then he goes into just a lot of what I like is Gunnar's a very intelligent guy. So a lot of it breaks down why the film has been as successful and as well regarded as it has. Like pretty much from like a psychological standpoint of how it fits into horror, over the years and stuff.
I'd like to hear him answer why Nail Gun Massacre didn't have quite the same social cause.
Well, so that's that. We're going to get our guests on, but you know what we we encourage you to, on the page for this, on the Geek Nation page. I mean, obviously, we post things on Facebook, sometimes to get things interactive, but we want people to comment on Discus underneath the actual link on Geek Nation. So for this episode, since it is going to be Madman centric.
Whoa, you telling me we have a guest from the actual movie Madman?
Yes.
On the West Coast?
Multiple guests,
Holy
including
crap.
Madman himself.
Madman Marz.
How cool is
Don't
that?
say his name.
I won't.
Don't
I
even
didn't say
whisper
it. You
it.
did.
Don't even utter it. Oh,
You said
shit.
it. But we're gonna encourage you guys. This is one of my favorite 80s slashers, and Elric just discovered it. So let's do 80s slashers on the Discus. This
Favorite
week.
80s slasher.
Yes.
And we thought we were alone. Yes. That's the tagline.
Okay, so as we just mentioned seconds ago, we've been talking about this little film. I've talked about it quite a bit, but Elric had just seen it a few weeks ago and picked it up in Texas.
I was a new viewer. See, I grew up in New Zealand, and I never saw it growing up. It wasn't one of the ones on my shelf, so I got to see it in the best form possible for my first screening, so as a Blu-ray. So
now, if only you had somebody involved with the movie in the room that you could talk about it right now.
We can talk about
a lot of stories.
Boom! We do. We actually have Madman Marz himself, Paul Ehlers.
just don't whisper his name.
We also have the producer, Gary Sales, with us.
Hi there. I
Welcome.
can't do the belch like him, but
My buddies from New York. And also in the room, got a call out to Jonathan Ehlers, the son of Madman Marz.
Hey.
Good friend of mine. Very talented filmmaker, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And we're going to get into it, but he was born during this movie, which is kind of fun.
And it's the 35th anniversary of the film.
Right.
So
So you go forever.
he's late by his age forever.
First thing I saw was a monster.
Which you know what, we might as well delve into that really quickly is that and this is funny that Paul brought this up right before we went on, is Elric and I have talked a lot about this Amazing Stories episode called Mummy Daddy. It's my favorite episode of that show, where a guy is a mummy on the set of a movie and
He has to get to the hospital for his wife.
Exactly, gets called to the hospital and he gets mistaken for a real mummy. And we were joking, like, who wrote that episode? Because that happened in real life. That happened on the set of Madman.
Someone had to have heard this story. I mean, right? I mean, there we were back in the day. You know, we didn't have the phones we have today. So what Gary got me was a good old-fashioned doctor's beeper, I guess, right? A beeper.
yeah, it was not digital. All it did was beep.
It just beeped. That was it. And and I had on the overalls and the blood and all the guts, and and I wore it on the side in a little pocket. And we joked about when it would go off. It would probably be in the middle of a shoot. And I don't remember the time. Do you? It was 1, 2, something. Early morning. It had to be because
It was the middle of everything was in the
everything
middle of
was in the middle of the
night.
night. We only shot at night, so it goes off, and I'm going, oh my god, what? And people are going, your thing's going off, and I said, oh my god, I got out of here. So I'm like, get the stuff off of me, get the makeup off. Come on, where's Joe Hansen? I got to take off the head, the hands. So she kind of peeled everything off and got it off. There's some glue remaining, and there was latex and blood still on me and my hands, and and I was dressed basically as the character. And I dashed to my little cabin to get my car keys because I had to drive into North Shore Hospital. Okay, so we had to go back into Nassau County. And I get in the car, and I don't know how long a trip it normally was, but whatever hour of the night it was, and I was excited. So, I made it like an hour and a half, very quick. And kind of screeched in, parked the car, jump out, and come up to the front door of the hospital, and I realized what I look like. I mean, I look like I just stepped out of an accident. So I said, excuse me, could one of you guys tell me where maternity is, please? And the guy's looking at me going, sir, you want emergency? I said, no, man, I want maternity. So I couldn't really explain it, but he kind of pointed, and I kind of dashed away. And
it's not my blood. It's not my blood.
It's not my blood. And there we were, and upstairs, and his mom was in labor, and and the whole thing was going on. It was, I think, when I was holding you after you were delivered, I still had stuff on me,
Nice.
So after that, nothing
pretty
could be
great.
scary to you.
It's in there. It's somewhere buried in the.
So someone,
That's why Jonathan's not scared of this stuff.
deep scars.
Yeah,
deep scars,
Many
never-
hours on the couch.
That's why you're a filmmaker, right?
exactly.
Wow. And how far in the shoot was that? Was that towards the end, or kind of like? I mean, did you have much more
No,
movie to make?
that was about midway, and that was in the middle of that iconic shot of Madman coming at you with the big beefy backlight and the
the
smoke
blue light.
behind him, and
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
and the axe, and he's walking at you with the track all built, and then that was
it's like, what?
yeah, that was Jimmy Limo's great shot there. The DP come up with that one, and it's quite iconic. That's the image that you see. What do we call your podcast, Rob? I wanted to ask.
Oh, this is Killer POV.
Killer POV.
Welcome.
There we
Yeah.
go.
I like it.
Nice.
Killer
Good
POV.
show.
How you just mentioned shooting all at nights. How much of a toll does that take on people? Shooting every single night. For how long was it? How many days?
Well, we thought we were going to do about a 4-week shoot.
Oh wow!
And it turned into more like 6. I mean, we were young and ready to take on whatever it was. We started on my birthday, actually, on the 21st of October, and I think we ended somewhere around December 7. It was the day John Lennon was shot, I think. I woke up to that, and I was like, we wrapped and we woke up, and it was quite a startling thing to wake up to. But, and we
Must have been a fun Halloween party, though.
Yeah, Halloween was fun.
That was a fun one.
Yeah, and Halloween was fun the year after when Joey and I went to try to sell the movie. We landed in L.A. on Halloween night, like 1981, and stepped into all. We didn't have any costumes or anything, so I said, "Come on, let's run into." We ran into like Ralph's or something. We bought a couple of black masks so we could at least look reasonable. But it was, we had quite a time in the 6 weeks, and I mean. It's a true vampire life, but you're doing it with a whole tribe.
Yeah.
Everybody got into it, and it was kind of interesting. I mean, you just live, you change, your biorhythm shift. I mean, some of the fun I had was sitting in the hot tub in the morning in the place. We had this great hot tub in the middle of this. We were in a little resort facility. And I hadn't slept for 40 hours or something like that, so I didn't want to go to the set. So I would on the walkie-talkie say, okay, what's happening? And I'm sitting there in the tub.
I think that's what everyone's image of what producers do. Everyone wants to believe that's what you do.
It wasn't the normal thing.
right.
Usually we're freezing our butts off or something like
In
that.
that very, very famous hot tub, by the way.
The actual movie tub.
Immortalized.
Screen tub, yeah.
That is the
Immortalized.
Some action went down.
Oh, yeah.
We
That's
take a lot.
to
We
fun
take a
piece of
lot
music.
for that.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning and talk, obviously, about meeting Joe and how all you guys hooked up. But first, I have to tell the story. I've been dying to tell the story, which is the way, Paul's an old friend of mine now for many, many years. And the way I met him is actually pretty hilarious. What happened was I was back in New York at least a good decade or so ago now. And I can't remember where, but somebody along the lines gave me his phone number. It was to me and the other Icons of Fright guys, Jason Alvino, and it was like, hey, you guys love that Madman movie. Do you know that he lives, out east on Long Island? And we're like, really? So they're like, yeah, he's a nice guy. Just call him up. And we got your number, and we just chickened out. We could just never. We're like, no, what are we gonna say? What are we gonna do? And then what happened was it was like a Sunday afternoon, and me and Jay are driving around. I can't remember what business we had, but we had to go pick something up somewhere, on the east side of Long Island, and we got lost. And we ended up in your town at a burger joint. Like, we're just like, oh, God, let's just get food or something. And we're sitting in the burger joint, and we realize where we are. We're like, I'm pretty sure that Madman Marz lives in the town that we're eating burgers in right now.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. We have to call him. I want to call him and have burgers with him right here. So sure enough, the next day I finally got the courage up, called you. You were sweet as hell. And of course, a few days later, like, yeah, come and hang out or whatever. And he met us at that burger joint. And it was just one of those weird things where we just got lost in this town and knew that what connection it had. And a few days later, we're sitting there having burgers with Madman Marz. And we hung out the whole time and became really good friends. And I'll never forget, I posted a photo of us having burgers together. And Dave Parker, friend of the show's, this is in the MySpace days. So I posted a picture of us saying, we're having burgers with Madman Marz. And Dave Parker is the first comment saying,
in Burgers of Madman Marz, what's next? Coffee with Humongous? Which we'll have to find Humongous.
There were some unproduced scripts, I believe.
Yeah.
Burgers with
It's
Marz.
better than we were burgers for Madman.
Yeah. But no, ever since then, it's just we've all been friendly, and obviously, when I moved to LA, Paul's son Jonathan lived down here, and we got together and got along really well. So tonight is a family affair. That's kind of what I'm getting at here.
Right on.
Did you guys come to the house that same day? Right?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the other thing that I know a lot of our listeners always appreciate is that Paul is a huge horror fan, and he's a monster kid. Has been since day one. And when we got to his place, not only did we get to see a lot of stuff from Madman, but a lot of stuff from his personal collection, things, movie memorabilia and things he's collected over the years. What do you have from Jaws again?
My in-laws, back then, they had family that lived on Martha's Vineyard. And they knew my wife, Eddie, and I loved the movie Jaws. Mm-hmm. And they had gone there. At the time, I think the Orca 2, which is the stunt orca, the one that they raised and lowered, the Orca 2 had been abandoned. And since then, I know the man who owns it has been putting out little 1-inch squares of it with a book and so forth. But at that time, a lot of it was demolished. I think people were taking pieces of it and parts of it. And, they thought it would be a great idea to present us with something from the Orca 2. And what they gave us was a section of the mast. Very old, rotted away. But I matched it up with the movie, and it's the same section of the mast that Scheider is near the top of it when he says, "Smile, you son of a bitch." Boom.
Oh, nice.
And it's that piece of the orca. Yeah. So it's...
you have that.
And yes, we have it. Yeah. It's very cool.
And apparently the Martha's Vineyard residents get funny about people...
They don't like you doing that. Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, if anybody hears this, folks, I mean, I really had nothing to do with this except I accepted it, but I've taken very good care of it. So yeah, we have that in the house. I remember when you guys came over, I didn't tell you what it was at first, and there were a whole lot of you. There were a bunch of you.
Yeah.
And I walk in like dragging this thing in, and I stand it in front of them, and they look at it like, it looks like a telephone pole, right?
Yeah.
And I said, "Gentlemen, this is the mast of the orca from Jaws." And they started bowing to it.
How could he not?
And there were little crumbs of it on the ground. I mean, Jay Alvino took some of the crumbs. And he put it in a little glass vial.
Yeah.
So that was all very cool.
I wish it was me and Mike C. and Jay Alvino from Icons of Fright and our friend Chris Garetano.
Chris was there.
Filmmaker,
Chris.
Who is you have a bit part in his
in Montauk Chronicles. Yes.
I feel like Chris shot some stuff. I want to get video of this if it exists, because my favorite discussion that day was there's a scene in Madman, if you've seen it. If not, pause, go watch it, come back. But if you've seen it, there's a scene where the girl comes, running in to hide from Madman, and she opens the fridge, and she takes all the fridge stuff and throws it on the floor and jumps in and then closes the thing behind her. And I just remember Jay having this very serious discussion where he's saying, "Listen, I just don't understand. It's like she threw all the food on the floor. So did you walk in and see that and think, all right, I got to take a break. I got to go outside. I know she's in there because I see everything from the fridge on the floor. I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to get my axe, and when she gets out, I'll get her." And I just thought that was so funny that it was like, Madman's like, wait, no, is she really hiding in there? All right, she deserves an extra 5 minutes to live, I guess.
I thought the good thing about that, thinking back, is that I saw her go in the fridge. I knew the danger of them locking automatically. And in fact, they found her remains about 25 years later.
Yeah.
So I never had it decapitated. I just let it go slow.
Right.
Her performance is actually pretty remarkable.
If you recall, you're inside the fridge with her after that. And what you hear is you wrecking the room.
Yeah.
Right.
So he was either both eating the food and throwing everything around.
That was our theory. I was like, what were you doing? Were you eating the food?
Then he went out to barf, and then he came back to do it.
All right. I like that. I like that commentary there. That's great. So let's go back to the beginning. So the director Joe is a good friend of yours, Gary. You guys, how far back did you go?
We were schoolmates. We were college mates. We went through Joe grew up in the Flushing Bayside area of Queens in New York, and I grew up in similar areas, and we were at Queensborough Community College together during the heyday of the student riots and the takeovers and all that stuff, and we got to know each other there. But then all of us migrated to Staten Island, where there was the college there had a great film program where they basically were giving people like $5,000 to make their student films. So the word got out and everybody was running there to go take advantage of that. Plus it was a very progressive school with pass, fail, and honors only. No grades, no attendance requirements, no finals. It was perfect. You know, you just packed up a lid of pot and you went over there and you hung out in the student lounge. That's what it was all about.
But it was in Staten Island.
Yes, it was.
That's the rub. You have to go to Staten Island.
Yeah, but I lived in the East Village at the time, so it was actually not too bad. I'd get on the train, go down.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty interesting commute every day because you'd get on the darn thing and you had a good, solid, quiet 20 minutes where you could do all the homework you never got done.
Right.
Or sleep or whatever you wanted to. I actually did my documentary shoot on the Staten Island Ferry as a program for the documentary class. But anyway, Joe and I went there, and we got involved in the theater department there. We were doing theater of all kinds, and we knew people from that. Tony Fisher was there also at some point, and a lot of other guys who we would have liked to have come work with us, but some of them had become SAG at the point so they couldn't do the job. So that's where Joey and I met, and we had always, fantasized about, okay, how are we going to get into this business? And we went over that lots of times. And when we got out of school, I was producing off-Broadway theater with another one of our classmates, Tony Chipola. And Joey was writing stuff and doing stuff. And finally we said, okay, we got to make a move. We got to do something real. Joey convinced me one night in an Indian restaurant on 6th Street there, which Little India. He said, we can do this, but you got to stop smoking pot. Because he says, because you got to give it up for a while because you're just doing too many things. You know what I mean? It's just making you crazy. So I said, okay, fine, so I stopped. I took a break for a while, and 7 months later, we actually were making the movie. So he was right.
Wow, very productive period.
Yeah, it was very good, very good. But basically, we had three choices. It was do porn, which people would, if you want to break in the city at that time. It was still film, so there was that part of it. It was still the film part of porn. And but we didn't think there'd be a real future there. The Mafia kind of owned it at the time. We didn't know video was going to turn it into the next greatest money-making machine the world had ever seen. So we didn't do that thing. Action-adventure was the other choice, but it was often a little more expensive to pull off.
Yeah.
But horror, all of a sudden, with the advent of Friday the 13th and even earlier than that, Halloween, made it clear that without stars, but with a decent story and a decent quality of movie, you had a shot for getting something done. And then Paramount went along and picked up Friday the 13th as the first major motion picture studio to release an independent horror film. And that kicked open the door for everybody. And of course, all the studios were sitting there. Nobody had anything on the shelf. So all of a sudden, they would take anything that you could bring to them, and that's what caused this situation where if you walked in with a horror, 85 minutes worth of horror, they paid you $1 million and you went away and you were a happy kid. And so we all jumped on that. We were saying, let's try to get this done. We went out to do that. We were a little behind by the time we got there. There were 15 movies being made when we started it. When we got to the American film market, one of the first ones that were done here in like 1981, they were 135 million. Whoa. So it changed the supply and demand factor. We still got picked up by Jensen Farley, and it worked out really well. We got the picture out, which is
what is this? Because you shot it in 1980.
We shot it during the winter, the fall, winter into the winter of 1980.
Yeah, and then it got released.
And then we took it back. 1981, we were editing and putting the pieces together and figuring out, it's kind of like, you two young filmmakers, it's all about make the film. Yeah. Make the film. Nobody's even thinking about how you're going to sell the film. Make the film.
Yeah.
Then we have the film and we're sitting around there going, okay, now what? So Joey started, he was in the editing room all the time. I was on the phone all the time holding off the creditors and dealing with that stuff. And finally one day I just said, oh, fuck it. I'm going to call Universal and just talk to whoever it is and tell them, hey, it's Gary Sales calling from New York. I got a movie I want. And unbelievably, I called and I got through to the top guy at Universal at the time, whose name escapes me at the moment. Once he realized what he was dealing with, he said, okay, fine, you can come out and I'll screen you. I'll set you up. Here's my guy, make an appointment, come out. So that suddenly gave me the confidence that, okay, this is the way the game can be played. I can do this. So I started calling up a bunch of them, and we made a bunch of reservations to go meet with people. This was no video those days. You wanted somebody to see your movie, they had to book a screening room.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, and there's all kinds of wonderful stories that come along with that, because we went everywhere with this, and in fact, I just shipped a print to the guys at the Hudson Horror Show in Poughkeepsie. Madman's gonna play there on the 13th of June.
Oh, cool.
It's sold out in 48 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah. And so that was what we did. Us in the print, traveling in the plane, schlepping it everywhere. None of this little internet stuff and little tiny DVDs and stuff. And so we would hump the print to a screening room, give it to the projectionist, and oftentimes as we started to get to know how the projectionists were, we would say, do you think we can hang here with you and kind of watch how the guys... And we saw all kinds of interesting things. They'd come in, and he might come in with his secretary. They might not pay a lot of attention to the movie for a while. There could be, or somebody might come in and say, okay, put up reel 1, and then a couple minutes go by, and it'll say, all right, reel 3, reel 5, and they'll just get through it. They'll be out the door in 15 minutes.
Right.
Some of them will say, just show me reel 1, show me the middle, and show me the end. Sometimes they wouldn't show, and they would still give us a report as to what they saw. So it was pretty interesting. It was a pretty interesting experience about how people do that. So, but one of the things about it, I want to just take a moment to pay homage to Joey Giannone, the director, who's not with us anymore. He was a great partner. He was a great guy. I mean, he and I haven't found a match to date. It was one of those, I had what he didn't have, he had what I didn't have. He was very single-minded, very careful and controlling, and I was very wild and crazy and doing a million things. So somehow between the two of us, we managed to make that work. And literally, he moved in with me into my apartment when we were doing the movie, and we got the money, and we would go out together on the pitch calls to try to get money. Sometimes I would go out in the afternoon because I was working a regular job, and I'd go out during lunch and see somebody's accountant or try to get money. But then, there were times we'd go out together, and, I'd be yakking away, and with the guy, and Joey would be listening. And then at the end of the thing, when the guy would say something, Joey had remembered every word that was said. Wow. Nobody could go back the other way, because Joey had a photographic memory for people's things. So it was very interesting, because I would forget everything. I'm just talking, and Joey would end up saying, no, that's not what you said. You said this. Are you willing to do that? Oh, no, I can't do that. So it was very interesting. Between the two of us, I get the door broken open, and he'd make sure we got away with the gold or not.
Right.
And it worked out good. What about, I miss him dearly, and he would be like, he's thrilled up there right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of little questions. I'm sure Elric does too. But one of the things, I think the time that this movie came back into, I remember it vaguely as a kid, but when it came back was when Anchor Bay did their first release of it. And it's been a while, but it's on this Blu-ray, and I'm going to listen to it. There's a commentary with Paul, Gary, with Joe, and Tony Fish, who's also no longer with us. Yeah. So, and I noticed in the features there was a screening, I guess, at the Huntington Cinema Arts Center.
That's correct.
That Joe got to go to. So my question is, I feel like the cult following got started up again when the Anchor Bay release came out. So did Joey at least get to see a little bit of it? Because it seemed like for that footage from the screening, like you guys were excited that people were excited to see the movie again.
It was very interesting, because I was speaking to Joe afterwards, and he came up to me, and don't forget, we had done the movie. It was out. We were older then. Okay, I hadn't heard much about the film over the years from people. Suddenly we have a showing, and there's teenagers there, and there's young people there, and all ages, and they're coming up to me and they're saying, I love that scene where you do this and you swing the thing that way, and then they started talking about dialogue and how many people were killed and so forth and so on. And like my mouth is hanging open, and Joey's listening to this. We went outside and we said, who knew? who knew this thing had such a following? And there was a theater full of fans. And it did. It had legs, thank God. And, when I saw it, when I made the film and I was into horror, my whole life I had been into horror. And here I was 30 and making the movie and anxious to see what my friends thought of it, who were, again, horror fans. So, we talked about it afterwards, the good things about it, the things that were not so great, blah, 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 blah. But nobody could give me an honest sense of if it was scary. Mm-hmm. And I always felt terrible. I said, God, if I could only go back to when I was 7 and 8 years old and saw, Hammer films and really see this movie and know if it's scary, because I don't know. And this was the fans at the show that night and at the the other horror conventions. The guys would come up to me and go, Paul, you scared the shit out of me when I was 7 or 8. And I loved hearing this. I mean, it was the best thing. I remember when you guys all left.
Right.
You all piled into a car and you're backing off my gravel driveway. And I grabbed like a tool of some kind. And I started doing the walk towards the headlights of the car. And then you guys are screaming in the car. Guys, somebody said, I used to have nightmares about this when I was a kid. Oh, my God.
I want to think for the first year of our friendship, probably even up till now, anytime you leave me a voicemail, it starts out with at least 45 seconds of growling.
Right. I always like to do that.
And I know exactly who it is.
Right. That's true. That's true.
No, he's worked at like Pavarotti over the years.
Yeah, I really have a talent now.
It's improved along those lines.
It seemed one of the lasting things and one of the qualities I really liked coming to it is it has what's missing from a lot of movies. There was even a movie called Urban Legends a few years ago that really didn't have any urban legends, but this one really feels like it connects to the folklore and an urban tale, and I think that has legs. So I wanted to go back to when you guys were coming up with the idea. Like you knew Friday 13th was already out there. How were you trying to set yourself apart when you were coming up with the story and kind of building your own folk tale?
Well, it's interesting because we ended up doing a kind of a tweak on what we originally had. If you probably already know about it from earlier things, we had to shift what we were originally doing because we originally were working under a working title, The Legend Lives, because we didn't want to give up the public domain name of what we were really working on, which was the Cropsey legend,
right?
Okay, which eventually came out in other forms through other people. So. But then somewhere mid-shoot and during the casting, we kept hearing from people saying, I read for something like this a couple of weeks ago. And then we heard this several times. And okay, horror films now, everybody's doing something in the woods, campfire copies of Friday the 13th. So then a girl comes in one day and she says, wait a minute, I was reading and helping my boyfriend run lines for a scene. He's now shooting this movie upstate in Buffalo. I said, what do you mean, these lines? She said, well, close enough. And so we happened, our production manager, Mark Silverman, who passed on also, great guy, great production manager. He used to do work with the Coen brothers. He knew the PM on the other movie. And he reached out to them. Again, we're in 1980 now. We don't have internet. We hardly had fax. I mean, Federal Express fax was $25 a page in those days. Yeah. So we managed to get an overnight of their script to us. And we had the script in our hands. And Joey and I read it. And it's, oh, shit, they're doing the fucking Cropsey.
Was it called Cropsey at the time?
They had enough in there that they had the name in there. So they had a different way of doing it. I don't know whether they...
Why do you think they would go away from keeping the name?
He's talking about these guys named the Wines.
Yeah, that's right. I was getting to that.
But it seems weird that they wouldn't have stuck with it because it's such a great title.
Well, who knows?
Yeah,
I mean, Harvey's the master, although he wasn't then, actually. That was a tough little deal there. But, I've tried over the years to try to get him and Bob to take on Madman as a sequel because, guys, we were that close.
I don't understand why they didn't... of all the things they've bought, remade, and sequelized, the fact that they've never done anything with The Burning, considering it's their own movie, is I just don't get it. But anyways,
that was the end of directing for him. No, listen, he had a great cast in there. Yeah. Had Richard Dreyfuss is in there, and a number of people, good people, are in that movie. So it was just one of those things. Now, bring me back to what the question was.
How you wanted to make it unique for yourself. What you said
was really interesting because I wrote a big post today in the Vinegar Syndrome. They've got their own site now that they have stuff going on Facebook page. And it was about what the difference of this would be if we get to do our remake, because somebody was saying that this should be, good fodder for being able to get the remake going. And the point of what I was writing was we were interested in some, a classical kind of arrangement of what happens from a campfire tale. What's it about? What are you trying to do? And our approach was, it's your imagination that's going to scare you far more than any gore I can throw at you. So our game was a lot of suspense, hold off showing who Madman was, let people try to imagine, get pieces of him until we get to the end, and carry everybody as long as we can building the suspense before we do the shock and gore, and then let him die down a little bit and then take it up another notch and keep doing it all the way through. So, and when it comes to the remake, we want to, it's the same kind of approach. We want to hit that subliminal twilight place between when you're like awake and asleep and the demons of your subconscious kind of come in and take over. That's what scares you. And if we can pull that out of people in a movie, and then some of the old horror films used to do that. It would get you going, and your own mind would get you going, and then they'd give you some visuals to work along with it. So that's the plan rather than, and part of the reason why we haven't been able to pull off the remake is because I don't want to hand it over to a studio to hand it to somebody just to remake it. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason I waited for a long time to do the Blu-ray. I wanted somebody who really could do the right job. And the guys at Vinegar Syndrome are really film fanatics, and they really are into the chemistry of the film. They're into the coloration and the restoration. So they did a great job on it. And then 4K laser scan, I mean, at 127,000 frames one at a time. It's 10 days of just, it does look great, right? Yeah. It's not just me. I mean,
I was telling these guys before you got here, I've seen it theatrically several times. They play it out here pretty regularly.
Oh, at New Bev.
At the New Bev, yeah. And I the last time I went to see it, it was pretty late, so I left probably in the third act because I'm like, I'm falling asleep. I'll just watch the DVD. Got home and I was so mad at myself. I put the DVD on. I was like, doesn't even look nearly as good as what I just saw on the big screen. So I'm happy that there's this new restoration. I know Elric was thinking about this too.
The sequel.
Yeah. Well, why was there never a sequel like early on? Did you and Joe ever talk about that?
We tried, but it was a tricky period because we were already, as I said, a little bit late. So that the saturation that took place, at first they had nothing on the shelves. Then everybody had 10 deep on the shelves.
Yeah.
And if you were around in the period, I don't know if you were, but if you studied the period, it was like every weekend there was a new 5 or 6 from all the studios out there, Terror Train and Night Stalker and this and that. And before you turned around, it got too saturated.
Right.
And so, and also the horror market, the genre, the audience and the fans, they're all the different subgroups, and they want to, slasher was running, let's move on to, zombies, let's move on to something else and find the same kind of stuff.
Right.
That being said, I really feel there's a opening now. I feel that there's not been any really good slasher type movies in the big arena lately.
Well, and especially, like I was saying, urban legends. I feel like that's the thing that sets it apart. There's still slashers, but they're, it's an urban slasher or something. But we were talking about Pumpkinhead not long ago and how that's a great, urban tale. And this, and I think this one rivals it for that quality. So I'd delve into that part of it,
Well, My Bloody Valentine popped up. That was sort of an urban legend in that area there. I just think the thing about Madman is it's got the commonality of the woods. Everybody's alone in the woods or with 1 or 2 people in the dark at some point in their lives. And that's the place where whether you're scared or not, that's where that subliminal starts to rise. And you wonder, what was that noise? What is that shadow there? No, anything that you were ever told about it that you just, and that's the thing about The Legend Lives. You scoff it off. You got a little bravado. But then if you're stuck there alone, all of a sudden you're walking back to the cabin and nobody's with you, and you get a little nervous. You go faster back to the cabin.
Where did the Cropsey? I mean, I'm speaking as somebody who wasn't from New York. I've heard of Cropsey, but where did that kind of come from?
I don't even know.
Catskill Mountains. He was a legend that people spoke about in the camps that I went to as a kid, and that's where it came from me. We would go to camp, and then the counselors would tell us the big stories, and Cropsey was a regular up there. Supposedly he was a farmer whose family was killed by errant campers who let their campfire go crazy and they got burned out. and until that way. There were a number of different incarnations, depended on the counselor du jour that was telling the story.
Right.
But everybody knew it. And then some guys, in Long Island, they picked it up about 5 years ago.
That documentary? I saw that documentary, yeah.
And they followed that. And that's kind of in the area, like the way Chris handled his thing, also in the sense of Martian Chronicles, right?
The Montauk thing.
Yeah, the Martian Chronicles. But, this is, I always feel that Madman has a great common bond with all around the world, because it's the old style of everybody tells campfire tales.
Campfire tale.
In all countries. At one point, we wanted to call it a campfire tale. And it's actually on the copyright. That's one of the possible names that was listed for it. But we ended up finding Madman partly because when we had to shift over, Joey and I rewrote the whole script at one point. We called our investor and we said, listen, we got an issue here. And we think we can get around it, but we want you to know, and we want you to get behind us or say, don't, and he said, no, go ahead, go for it. Yeah. Because they were 5 weeks ahead of us.
Yeah.
So we were afraid we'd get, we come up with a similar thing at the market. How are we going to ever get sold? So we redid it, and we came up, but at the time I was also doing the music for the picture, and I had been working with Holt's The Planets, and I had centered on the Marz piece in there. So I had that rolling already. I was working on themes coming off of that, and that just somehow in our, I hadn't been smoking pot, but I still had a pot head that would wander around, and somehow Marz and then Madman and Madman Marz came out and said, well, that's got a nice alliteration.
It's one of the great songs. In a horror movie, it's probably the best song ever played. And it really, again, that song adds the folktale quality. You can see kids singing it or humming it to themselves. Yeah. If you had a remake, someone could be humming it at starting to get whacked.
It's so nice that you say that. I always get so much appreciation.
It's really cool.
Well, Gary, give a plug to that, man.
Yes.
The vinyl is coming.
Yes. There is. I'm glad you brought that up.
Vinyl.
We are going to release the soundtrack of Madman.
Heard it here first, folks.
Are you doing it independently or through one of these labels?
I'm going to do it through, I will say, and I told him I'm going to publicize it today, even though we haven't fully closed.
Well, that's why I'm playing until Friday. So.
I know. I think I know who it is. But
everybody knows who the best place to do it with anyway at this point. Okay, what's your guess?
Well, I'm pretty sure he was on our show once because, Death Waltz and Mondo is the way to go.
Okay, so there you go. That's
sorry, Spencer. You broke the scoop.
Yes. Sorry, Spencer. I'm just speaking it out now. And we'll get this closed soon. And we got some great, we've been working on some great art for the album cover. I won't give that away yet. So,
Cool.
So it's all very cool. And the interesting thing about that is in pulling the tracks, I listened to them for the first time in 30-something years as music. Not attached to the imagery and all that stuff. And I was so tickled by, not necessarily the songs. Of course, I love my songs. No, but I was tickled by the electronic music. I was a music major at the time when I shifted over to study film. Yeah. And I was particularly into electronic music and working booklers and ARPs and Moogs and all that. And Steve Horlick, who did the music, I gave him some ideas, some themes, and then he ran with it like crazy. And there's all tales from him, if we ever can get him in the room here, because this is the days he didn't even have a sync generator. He couldn't sync picture with that. He'd have to hit this button and this button at the same time, start picture and start the work and play to the screen. And if he made a mistake, he'd have to go back and start all over because he didn't have that stuff.
That is really tough.
So it was crazy stuff. So
I think that's why vinyl's coming back, is because people are listening to these things for the first time
without the movie and appreciating it for really good music.
This, particularly for the geeks in the room, his electronic music equipment was pre-digital. This was analog electronic music. This was voltage control. Wow. This was not just simply a bunch of chips. This was before the digital stuff came down. So that's even more interesting because they had a warmth that you'll get out of analog now. Yeah. But it really sounds great as music, And I was listening to Morton Subotnick in those days and all those kind of, the different kinds of electronic musicians, Wendy Carlos, and it's in that vein. And I think we were the first to provide electronic music as a backing to a horror film. And
I think it may have been John Carpenter with Halloween.
Was that
John Carpenter and Halloween?
Few years before.
Yes, but he wasn't doing electronic music.
Yeah,
not like that. He was playing. He wasn't playing. He was playing melodic stuff.
Keyboards, but electronic too.
It's a little different if you listen to it. But okay, I'll back off.
Synthy, definitely synthy.
There's people like screaming right now at our.
Well, the fans decide.
You know where to find me if you want to post down that. Hit us at Mad Marz Movie.
I've got the most important question because Rob probably has overlooked it because he knows this already. But how does one get cast as Madman in this movie?
I was going to actually bring that up.
Okay, good. I'm just thinking.
Well, not just the casting, Paul, but again, I know
that's a great story.
I know what a big horror fan you are. So, being well versed in the genre, like, what did you think of this material the first time you heard about it? Because again, this is kind of right on the cusp of the slasher stuff. So, as a fan, and I know how excited you've always wanted to play a monster in something. So
exactly. Well, Joey was out visiting at that time. Jim Grillo's wife was Gloria.
Okay,
Gloria was the person that you guys knew.
Gloria Grillo.
Right, and so we were out there, and he had heard about me, Joey, through Jimmy, who I've known forever. And he knew I knew horror from film, so we were up a whole night talking about what we thought was scary, what made things scary, a lot of things that you don't see, and so forth. And we kind of left it at that. I didn't know where it was going to go beyond that. And then I got a call from you guys because I think at that time you were looking for somebody to do the poster. You want somebody to do the poster art, and I was working as an illustrator at the time. So they called me in to talk about that, and you didn't even have a really set idea, I think, of what the character was going to look like just yet. We talked about how he might appear to be, and I remember I did some comps and some roughs, which became the really early poster, which you can see on the Blu-ray, of the character pulling the girl by the hair. But again, that's before I knew anything about the part or really a lot about the character. And I know you guys had tried a lot of people, right? You had seen very tall people.
In looking for Madman, it's a crazy casting call. I mean, what are you looking for? You're looking for a big guy over 6'5", and so we got a lot of wrestlers and we got a lot of big dudes, none of which really had, we didn't have dialogue, so there wasn't any way to test for that. So it was more about, walk across the room, show us what you do with an axe, and do this kind of stuff. And there was nothing inspirational about it. These were guys just, they want to get a job and they want to do stuff. There was nobody really had something inside. And then there was him.
But I had done martial arts. I had done weapons training, so I could do a lot of that. And the joke I tell everybody is a lot of the scenes I did with a real axe coming very close to the actors' heads. That was the real axe. But Joey trusted me to do that without no thud, without hitting anybody. If they found that out later on, I think people would have been very upset. But the story I tell about it, which apparently is not exactly accurate, is that we were talking about the poster, and I was talking about how I was illustrating the character, and I always say that Joey and Gary turned to each other and they said to me, "What are you doing for the next 2 months?" It wasn't exactly that, but they did ask. They said, would you like to do this? And I said, yes.
We were frustrated because we were done all this, and we were sitting around one night. We said, "Wow, we got most of this movie cast except for the main character."
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there I had some kind of little epiphany where 2 and 2 added up, and I started to say, wait a minute, Paul, look at this great artwork. He's got tremendous inspiration and affection for what we're doing. And he's a big guy at the time. I mean, he's shrunk now, but at the beginning,
come on, sure.
At the time, he was a good 6'4" or so, and he had the stuff. So I said, why don't we ask Paul if he wants to do it? And after we cleaned up the cum on the floor, I mean,
that's true. It was a fabulous experience.
It's the way. It's really the way I like to produce. I mean, producing can be a really, put together everything to fit in, and all these pieces have to be exactly right. And some producers are very anal like that, and it's got to work. And I appreciate that up to a certain point, but I also love the happy accident. and which I think finds its way into scenes and shots and all aspects of making a movie or doing anything, even building a building, anything that includes that many events. Sometimes you just get it right. You get lucky out of not any design. It's just the right pieces come together. So there was great synergy there that came to us from just the act of the fact that we were doing it. And that, with the young filmmakers all the time, that's always the thing of, I want to make this movie, but, you want all the lights to be green. That's not how the world works. The world works, you get your green lights and you keep going, you get a red light. There's never any all green lights. You got to just start going with your first green light and you keep going the best you can.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. And good things happen to us, like that with Paul. Weird things happen to us, like the casting issue and finding out that we had to rewrite the script. And that also threw us into another thing because we had to back up the schedule a little bit. And we were always intending to shoot nights, and we're always intending to shoot up at Jimmy's place or somewhere upstate New York. Suddenly we looked up and said, oh my God, it's going to be 25 degrees every night there. We got to find a less cold place. So we started hunting around. That's what led us to Fish Cove, Long Island in the end, and brought us out there. It was a little warmer. Eventually we stayed long enough that we did find the cold. But I'll tell you one thing that's very interesting. When I was pulling my socks on one morning, any morning at that time, getting ready to go out and do this, or any afternoon actually, because we go to work at late, I never would have dreamed that I'd be sitting here in this room with you guys 35 years later, nonetheless releasing the 35-year-old movie and then we had a 30-year 2010 release. And, we're also coming out through Arrow Films in the UK on August 3rd in England and in Ireland.
That's amazing.
So it's just crazy. And the other part of the experience is it's the unfortunate loss of film but the value of film. The fact that this negative sat around for 35 years, first 20 maybe we had it in vaults and it was properly handled. Then I couldn't afford to keep doing it, so it ended up in Joey's garage at somewhere between 30 degrees in the winter and 80 degrees in the summer.
Oh, wow.
I finally yanked it out of there a few years back. In the last 5 years, I've had it in Manhattan mini storage or whatever, which still is not perfect. But we pulled it out and they took it out, and there was really not that much wrong with it. You couldn't do that with digital right now. If you put a hard drive through that, with curtains.
And people are scared about the future because they don't know what the storage is going to be in 10, 15 years. It's
the interesting thing that I have Jonathan here because at the time
he's stored.
Well, this is the funky thing is that back when he was in elementary school in PS 99 in Queens, in Kew Gardens area, and we were living that time in Kew Gardens, and he was in a class with another young boy who it turns out we got to know the little guy's mother, and she used to say about her husband, he was kind of an odd-looking guy.
Amazing.
And he was in a movie, and my ex, Jane, back then was talking to her about it, and she said, yeah, my husband starred in this movie called The Burning. And Jonathan and Davy Davidson were really good friends in school. So here's the Madman children and the Burning children.
I think his name is Lou David, the guy that played.
Was it Lou David?
Yeah.
Was it Davy Davidson?
Davidson.
Maybe they changed his name.
Maybe a stage name, whatever.
But there's Jonathan hanging out with the guy who plays in The Burning.
The sons of Madman and Cropsy from The Burning.
The sins of the fathers. The sins of the fathers.
What are the chances of that? I mean,
right?
that's
crazy. That's so crazy.
Maybe somebody should hook up a kind of a multiple reunion. Because we
just before dog kids.
Cropsy versus Madman.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's a good one.
Call it The Burning Axe.
The Burning Man.
That sounds right.
Right.
Oh, man. God, I had a question for Paul, and now I'm drawing a blank. What do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like, your experiences, because not being an actor and not having the desire to act so much as you want to play a monster.
Right.
What's the experience of actually shooting this? Because your timing, he was talking before about the pacing. I just watched another scene before I came here, and it was the scene where Galen Ross, who ages backwards in your film, because she's younger looking in that than she is 4 years earlier in Dawn of the Dead.
That's
somehow.
True.
I don't know how the hell
looks
she did
better
that.
In Madman.
Yeah, she does. But the scene where she's already fired off one bullet and then you disappear into darkness and then reemerge. The timing of that, like your timing, I mean, some of it's obviously direction, but
it was scary stuff.
It really works.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, it's a great
when
film
I creeped through the other room and coming at her. No, that was a terrific scene. I mean, it's funny. I did go to film school. I went to school of visual arts, and I had done my own little horror movies and so forth. But I really started turning my direction more towards illustration and design. And I did some voiceover work in college, did some voices, and kind of walked away from acting. And then I got the role, which got me all excited again about things. And it's funny now, we mentioned before Christopher Garetano, when he cast the movie Montauk Chronicles, which is allegedly based on a true story of many, many thousands of young boys that went missing in Camp Puro out in Montauk. That's been substantiated, actually. And he wanted me to play the heavy. So I act in the film. I've got dialogue, which is nice because they had me doing Madman, and I'm going... And my real talent is doing British accents and all kinds of other... But I really couldn't break into a campfire scene. Pardon my axe for a moment, will you? That was not going to work. That was like the Shakespearean version of Madman, which is,
Did you isolate... We were talking before you guys came on about... what's the actor who played Leatherface?
Gunnar Hansen.
Gunnar Hansen. How... Did you isolate yourself from the rest of the cast while you're shooting so you could remain...
I did so... Well, yeah, but not so much. But what happened in reality is we would break at midnight to have lunch. And I remember in the beginning, we all sat, we had big, long tables in the dining room. It was terrific. And I would sit with all the rest of the actors and we would talk about the movie and this and that. And then I noticed by the last weeks of filming, I ate every meal by myself. No one would be sitting with me. And I'm going, gee, what happened? Come on, guys. And people just started to gravitate away from me. It was like a really funky situation. Yeah, but it's... but I had so much fun. I mean, I remember...
You didn't realize that's because Joey told them not to hang with you.
That's what it probably was.
Well, Joey sat separate almost every night because he was always kind of going over stuff. He was very meticulous about everything.
Always by himself.
So, that was... maybe he just said, hey... Make them feel.
It's funny. You're talking about being over enthusiastic, and I remember not having done a lot of film work at the time. And when they were filming scenes and moving lights, I remember I was starting to pick up lights and move them.
Cool.
And Joey didn't like that. Joey said, "That's not your job." He said, "Other people do that, please." Or, he'd say, hand the axe to someone when we yell cut. Because I'd be swinging the axe around, showing people how to do things.
Yeah.
So I got very over-enthusiastic about being the character. But it was great because it was just so much fun being the monster. And I know that not knowing whether or not I would ever do it again, I really tried very hard. I mean, I was breaking doors and doing things, and I was really doing it. I was, Joey would keep saying to me, "Can you go through this door? Can you?" And I said, "Sure," because of the martial arts. But so I tried very, very hard, and not knowing whether or not it would ever happen again. But,
I think it shows in the, because that's the thing I always loved about the movie is how sporadically you see Madman. Like you definitely don't get a good look at him until. Way into the movie, and even then you don't really see him that well. No. And to me, but those moments you really kind of give it your all.
Well, there's a physicality to it that is a performance. It's not just like sometimes when I see a Jason, not all Jasons, some Jasons were better than others, but there's something about the way he moves. That
any Jason that was ever on the show was great.
Yeah, right.
Let's keep it there. No, but there is, like, for instance, when it's not a put down, but I find a difference if you watch like Hatchet. I don't find that the physicality is works as well.
I assume whoever made that film, and I have no idea who it is, I assume he owes you royalties out the wazoo.
Me and Paul went to see Hatchet together in New York City.
We all went together.
But I mean, because I remember when that came out, I heard some people going, "Oh, it's like Jason." I'm like, no, this is like literally looks like your design.
The first thing he told me when he saw Madman, he's like, "I think it's way more like Hatchet. Or Hatchet's more like that." So.
Do you know if Adam was a big Madman fan?
I don't know. I've never talked to him about it, actually. I have no idea.
If he's listening to this,
if only
A, give them royalties, B,
right?
They have a show here, too.
They have a show on the same network.
I don't know if he got the overalls out of our stock closet or something. It was close enough. But that was very close. But the body language was different there. I don't think he had the same...
No, he moves like a freight train, kind of.
And it also seemed a little less serious in a certain way.
Yeah.
Paul... gave it something that's, that, like I said, it comes from the heart. And that's the thing about certainly the first one. Whenever you do a first thing, it always has that kind of specialty. Right. And here we had people who were working. That was their first movie. A lot of them. Now we hired keys that were really experienced. Jimmy Lemo had shot Ms. 45 for Abel Ferrara. Yeah. In fact, that's playing along with Madman up at the Hudson Horror Show.
Man, there's a double feature.
So that's a great one. Jaws is there that night too.
Yeah.
But it's a good night. But so he knew what he was doing. We had a good gaffer on there. We had great sound man on there. People that really, makeup people had some experience. But a lot of people was there cutting their teeth, And in fact, we had a problem with the key grip, who we had to let go at one point. And one of the guys that took over was a young PA whose name was Claude Curvin, who went on to write Mortal Thoughts, which actually got made with Bruce Willis and his wife after a while. And now he's a senior directing professor at NIFA in New York. Wow. And a lot of guys, Paul Kramer was a PA on that. I used to be his teacher when I was doing media in high school and teaching media to kids in high school. And he's now the location manager for Person of Interest. And so a lot of people got their start on that. And people just put their heart and soul, because nobody knew really how do you do this, or had done 10 pictures where there was a protocol to follow. We just kind of made it up as we went along. And a lot of that made it very interesting in that respect, because people just, necessity became the mother of invention there, and we came up with some cool stuff, and it always worked. It was always honest, at least in that respect. It was authentic, whatever we were doing.
Were all the kills already in the script, or would some of them come across once he was cast and you guys worked out what you could pull off?
I think we had to detail things, but the general lay of the land was there. I mean, the hanging was set up that way, and... maybe it's the back end, the slosh across the face of her. Did we?
Yeah, that's a nice moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. She told me at the time, please be careful. Don't throw me down too hard. Okay. And I know when I knock her down, it's like a very gentle. Be careful with the piano.
Yeah, but that's swipe though. That's the editing mostly. It's the same one you did to Michael Sullivan.
There you go.
When you take his
poor
neck
old
out
Michael.
there.
Poor old, yeah.
Well, Michael's good. He's around. He may come to Hudson Horror with us.
Since you brought her up, that's what I wanted to ask about before. You guys have already talked at great length about Galen Ross, or a.k.a. Alexis Dubin in this movie. But Paul, didn't you tell me once that you have recently crossed paths with her at the convention circuit again?
No,
I can't remember. Did that happen?
It was not me.
No, but fans bring it up to me all the time, and they'll ask the question, why is it that when I go up to Galen at a convention and I bring her my Madman stuff, she disowns me or disowns it and won't do anything?
Yeah.
And I can't answer the question.
I'm pretty sure I talked to her about it. I can't remember.
She used to turn pale, they told me. Really, it was, I don't know. What? I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
She's good in it. I actually really thought she was really... I mean, she's good in Dawn as well. And what's the other one, Creepshow? She's in one of the segments, the Ted Danson one, I think. The Drowning.
Right,
she's
right.
The only thing she's done. But it's like, no, I think she's... To me, performance-wise, you can't not look at her. Her face, the way she builds tension on her face.
No, she's quite beautiful also. Yeah. She's a very great look.
Maybe it's the boyfriend, whoever the boyfriend was back then. These things happen.
It's an interesting question. And I know her still personally. We were on Facebook together. She's a documentarian for the last 25 years or so. She does some great documentaries, interesting stuff. And I don't know, but she's still willing to do the Romero stuff. But somehow we're disowned. I feel a little hurt by that. I mean, but what can I do? That's
cool
the way
movie.
it goes.
Well, who's laughing now because you're number one on Amazon?
Who's
laughing now, Galen?
And
Not a different name either. So,
and it's interesting because I don't tell them to do it, but they pull her name and put it on there. I don't ask them to write Galen. They write Galen Ross because everybody knows who it is. There's no secret to it.
Yeah. So, was that illegal? Like, why did she change her name for it again? I can't remember.
She was SAG at the time. We went on SAG.
Okay,
we were
so
cheap as shit, man. No, we were low budget, and again, our first picture, and we were just trying to make it happen. And horror again didn't need to sell it. I mean, it was amazing that was it Betsy Harmer, that she did a horror film. That was one of the.
She needed a new car.
Yeah, there you go.
Plain and simple. That's her story.
That's right.
I love that story. I was next to her at a couple of conventions, and that's a wonderful story. She was getting a used Mercedes, right?
Yeah.
And they offered her the car. If somebody told her, "Don't worry, Betsy, no one will ever see this movie."
Exactly.
And that was Friday the 13th.
It was like they paid her the exact amount that it would cost her to get a new car.
Because she was a soap opera actress, right? She'd been in tons of soaps.
A lot of
kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well,
South
if they shot
Pacific
SAG, then she's done way better than a Mercedes.
Oh, yeah.
As far as residuals over the years.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, because Paul has a fantastic voice, if you haven't noticed, but for anyone that knows my documentary, The Psycho Legacy, that is the opening narration. Paul did it for me. I was thinking, we're trying to think, like, we need somebody with a cool voice to do this narration.
Legacy.
I just thought of him. I was like,
we should get him to do a new Killer PV intro.
All right. You're listening to.
While he's here, yeah.
Now, aren't there some new Orson Welles docs starting to come up? Because I think you can stand in.
We can do that. We can definitely get away with that.
In July, Frozen Peas.
You know the same fellow, I'm not remembering his name, who did the famous Jaws trailer? Did our film.
Oh, you're totally right, because I
voice.
watched the TV spots before.
Yes.
Oh, you're talking the voice.
The voice guy. There's a voice, that famous voice guy. It's one of the TV spots for sure.
Yeah, he did.
But I can't remember his name.
There was a comedy about that world last year. I can't remember the name of it. It's really funny.
Is it like
In the
World?
Yeah, where the two people are competing. It's called In the World. The film is good. Yeah, it's good comedy. You probably enjoy it.
Competing for
They're competing for the voiceover to be like voiceover kings, and they're doing it. It's pretty funny.
Another World, was it?
I think In the World.
Wasn't that what's her name?
The world of whatever.
Malin, the blonde.
I can't remember.
The blonde actress who did Sound of My Voice and stuff like that.
Maybe. I don't know.
Not Brett Marling, but
yeah, that's what I thought it was.
No, it's somebody else. It's a comedian. It's a straight
it's
comedy.
Lake.
You're right. You got it. Yeah.
Right, that's the one. Right,
Yeah.
It was actually a good movie.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, that world is just so interesting. And there was a time where that really mattered, It transported us somewhere. Nowadays, trailers are all fucked up now. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even watch a trailer because they show me the end of the movie. They show me the last shot of the movie.
Yeah, Elric's the one guy now that avoids trailers before
like the plague now.
Why? They give it away.
I saw, what was the one? It was the remake of Wreck. It was the American version. It had the last shot of the movie as the last shot of the trailer, where she falls on the ground, is looking at camera and gets pulled away, and you're just like, Jesus Christ.
Really?
Like,
last shot?
I always cite Congo. I hated that movie Congo, but it had a hell of a trailer. It was just like blurred monkeys and a camera moving, and I was like, I want to see that movie. But then you watch the movie and go, it's a piece of shit. But it's
they don't see in the disclaimer that they hit you with the Men in Black strobe when you go into the theater.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I feel like they could learn a lot, and I actually liked your TV spots that are on this disc.
Yeah,
some
they're
of
great.
Some of them where the variations really work.
Yeah. Really quickly, Paul, I just want to also bring up, because you mentioned illustration earlier, and you're a very talented artist. And in fact, what is your company called? Just Paul Ehlers Designs? Right
now it's just Paul Ehlers Design, and it's primarily what I'm known for. Of all things in the world, is being a knife designer.
These amazing knives.
Yeah. First an axe murderer.
Yeah.
Then knives.
You gifted me I think it's called the Mythos.
The Mythos, yes. My son has one in his living room.
Yes.
It was a fantasy piece that I designed. And I started around 1982 doing designs for knives that were art pieces that were not your standard handle and knife blade. For instance, if I did a scorpion knife, the shape of the knife reminded you of a scorpion. Years before, people would do a scorpion dagger, and they would do scrimshaw on the handle of a spider.
Yeah.
The whole form of the thing changed. And we did that from 82 to almost 2000. I worked with Gil Hibben, who's internationally known. Stallone owns 3 of my knives.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you make him a Cobra?
There's a Rambo connection. Didn't you design the...
No, I didn't do the Rambo knife, but it was... there was a knife I designed called the Bat, which was... you kind of held it in your fist, and bat wings came out either side and so forth. And Gil had told me he was at a show in California where Stallone had attended, and they were just talking about the movie Cobra. That he had done. And he picked up this one. He said, too bad I didn't have this. I would have used this in Cobra instead of the knife that they did use. So that would have been cool.
Yeah, Venice Beach.
They used one of your knives in John's picture in Ink and Steel, wasn't it?
Ink and Steel, that's right. Yeah, I used a design. One of my only practical designs ever.
Right, a normal knife, as it were, right?
A normal knife. But let me plug that for a minute. If you haven't had a chance, go see Ink and Steel, directed by Jonathan Ehlers and Patrick Perkins.
And I'm saying this now, I've known Jonathan for a long time, and some of the horror ideas that him and I have discussed privately, like, mark my words, like, every idea he throws at me is like a franchise in the making. He's got at least 2 or 3 kick-ass franchise ideas. So
cool.
Far too kind.
So hang around.
Pray to see.
Hang around, folks.
And you write a lot with your dad, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you guys. So that's good that you both have that relationship and love of horror. That
Absolutely,
mutual love of horror.
Grateful for that. Yeah,
that's great. I have your theme song, by the way. It's all about the blade. It's all about the blade.
That's cool. But yeah, the knife that is in Ink and Steel, the sort of the hero character, this mob enforcer, wears that knife in a shoulder rig opposite a 1911
45.
Yeah, so he. It's kind of like it's almost like a super chopped down short sword that you could wear along your rib cage. Wow. Nasty. It's great though. We used it well too.
Your dad thinks of these nasty things.
I know. So you can check out my stuff if you go to paulehlers.com.
Boom.
And you can look at all the gallery of knife designs that I've done. They're all one of a kinds.
Yeah. And it's amazing work, amazing. In fact, the Mythos, now I have to put it up in my living room. I have it, and I remember, because, we have some cases in our hallway, and my last roommate, I was like, I'm going to put this up. And he's like, no way, because if I stumble to the bathroom in the middle of the night, because they're real knives, like he's like, I don't want to cut myself open on that thing, and I'm like, all right, but he's no longer living there, so now I can put it out.
Okay, so who will get it now?
One of them bit David Scow, I think.
I gave David something a while back. Yeah, a couple of throwing. I call them pitchforks,
right?
Because you would throw them, and they were big forks about this long.
Well, they should.
But he bled with them. Yeah.
I'm surprised Game of Thrones hasn't come and knocked on the door.
Yeah, they should.
Damn it. Yeah, I'll tell you, to nod my hat to them is that they use swords that are really usable. They didn't do real fantasy swords. They did swords based on historically accurate swords. And that's why they work so well in all the fight scenes.
Yeah.
Although I'm not thrilled with the way the show's going on.
And Paul, what's your passion now? I mean, do you still do designing knives, or is it more illustration, or like what's the thing that
I
you're most excited about?
design plush toys. And then rip them to shreds. I'm still doing knife designs. I'm still doing concepts with Jonathan and his group at Lone Shark.
Yeah,
we're still doing that. I wasn't kidding. Back in the day when you hired me to do Madman, I was working for a toy company then.
That's right.
And I was doing plush dolls.
Wow,
this is really true. And there's one scene somewhere. Gary has this locked in a box, but there's a scene where Marz is in his basement and he's sitting. He's sitting.
It's the lair,
and he pulls out a box with toys in it.
Oh.
He's playing with a doll, and he rips the head off and he throws it, and then that was shot. It didn't get used. That's somewhere.
There was a point there where we were working for, okay, where is their character in Marz? What could be going on? And we had some sense that he was, even though he had been accused of murdering his family, and, that was the legend, that there was some pain involved in that. And so it's like his kids' toys and stuff that he was playing with at the time. And somehow when we were doing the cut, Joey just didn't feel that it was really, it seemed more confusing than anything else.
Right.
But it does lead to some interesting things in the new versions, because there's the reimagining. And then there is the sequel that Joey and I had written the format of a long time ago, which would be Hunt the Madman, which is where all of the surviving characters are, like, the Richie, who they get out of the, would come together with a couple of the relatives of the dead characters, and they're convinced by the relatives, who one of them is a sort of a computer geeky guy, he's got Google alerts going for murders, and he's tracking, and he's got a whole graph of stuff that shows this tracking of very unusual kinds of murders, and they're all very Marzian. So they convince them to go out, Max and them, and the lead guys go to hunt Marz. And it's really in the same, they further up into the Appalachian Trail, into the deep woods. Yeah. And what happens there, though, is, and it's very apropos. It was apropos when we did it. It's still apropos now. They get mixed up with a white supremacist biker gang who are hunting what they believe to be a terrorist training cell in the deep woods up there. Mm-hmm. And they all get mixed in together. The bikers, our guys, the heroes, Madman, the terrorists, and it becomes an action adventure picture, actually, an action adventure horror. So I guess I've told enough.
That's fun, though.
That's really crazy. Well, thank you guys so much. Yeah. Obviously you guys are East Coast, so the fact that you were in town this week.
And it's playing. So if you're listening to this on Friday.
The day that this airs, tonight at the Cinefamily, it's playing as a midnight screening, and all these guys are going to be there. So
at DCP, right? Like
a restored
print?
No, it's going to be the 4K DCP.
Yeah, so it's probably going to look perfect.
It's going to look great. I saw it at the Alamo Draft House in Yonkers, and
that's right. Yeah,
it's astounding. I mean, it's stunning is what the word I use for it. Compared to, it's like we shot it yesterday.
Wow.
And it comes with all the original. Certain things we didn't undo. There were certain scratch marks in it. They were hard to get out. Vertical scratches, which I would have had to have rotoscoped, and we didn't want to take them out. We left those in. But anything, other kind of things, the normal kind of stuff, we actually got rid of a kind of an annoying little flicker because somebody forgot to hit the HMI light and have it non-flicker for free. We actually minimized that, which was more annoying than anything else. So, it looks great, and I'm eager to hear what people, have to say. And, and anybody that's out there, join us and like us on Madman Marz Movie on Facebook, or tweet with us at the Madman Marz.
Yep, we'll post the links to that. The Blu-ray is out now. If you're in LA,
come on out on Friday night. What time is this show? Do you know?
It's at midnight of Friday, which means that
I can't do that. I'm afraid of the dark. But come out, folks.
I'd love to see everybody. It's a good space
for sure.
How confident are you at singing us out of this episode of the first stanza of the song? And not to put you on the spot, but this is literally the spot.
Lord of the campfire, telling of his horror, lost in the woods with the madman and the stars. Don't laugh at the tale, heed in the warning, the legend lives beware the madman Marz.
That was the greatest moment in podcasting.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming. That was awesome.